I never thought I would have to fight for the house my father built with his own hands. When Dad passed away 6 years ago, he left our family home to me, but I let Mom continue living there out of love. Everything changed when she married Harold, a wealthy businessman with teenage twins, who seemed to despise me from day one. The tension kept building, until one evening when Mom tearfully asked me to leave what Harold called their house. Little did they know, I had the ultimate trump card. Before I tell you how I stood up for myself after years of being pushed aside, comment where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever had to fight for what is rightfully yours. My father was the hardest working man I ever knew. As a skilled contractor, he built our family home from the ground up when I was just 5 years old. I remember watching him work weekends and evenings, carefully crafting every inch of our 2-story colonial with his calloused hands. That house represented everything about my dad, practical yet beautiful, built to last generations. We were a tight-knit family, just the three of us. Mom taught elementary school while Dad ran his contracting business. Our evenings were filled with laughter around the dinner table, and weekends were dedicated to home improvement projects where Dad taught me everything he knew about construction. When I turned 22, my world shattered. Dad collapsed at a job site, a massive heart attack that took him instantly. The doctors said he probably never felt pain, but that provided little comfort as we planned his funeral and tried to imagine life without him. The night before he passed, Dad and I had stayed up late in his workshop. Looking back, it feels like he somehow knew his time was short. "Anderson," he had said, setting down his sanding block, "I want you to promise me something. This house, it is more than just wood and nails. It is our family legacy. Promise me you will take care of it and take care of your mom." I promised without hesitation. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in our family attorney's office, surprised to learn Dad had left the house directly to me, not to Mom as I had assumed. "Your father wanted to ensure the house stayed in the family," the lawyer explained. "He trusted you to honor his wishes and allow your mother to live there for as long as she wanted." Of course I would. After graduating with my architectural engineering degree, I rented an apartment closer to my office downtown, but visited Mom several times a week. For 2 years we grieved together, keeping Dad's memory alive in the house he had built. Then Harold entered our lives. Mom met him at a fundraiser for the local hospital. He was a real estate developer, recently divorced and extremely wealthy. His expensive suits and luxury cars seemed at odds with our modest family values. But he made Mom laugh for the first time since Dad died, so I kept my reservations to myself. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, Harold had proposed with a diamond ring bigger than anything Mom had ever owned. When she called to share the news, her voice trembled with excitement. "Harold wants to meet you, Anderson. This is important to me." The dinner was awkward from the start. Harold arrived 15 minutes late with his 16-year-old twins, Zach and Ellie. While Harold charmed Mom with stories of his latest development project, the twins spent the evening glued to their phones, responding with one-word answers whenever I attempted conversation. "So, Zach, I hear you are on the lacrosse team," I asked. "Yeah," he muttered without looking up. "And Ellie, Mom mentioned you are into photography." She glanced at me with thinly veiled annoyance. "It is just a hobby." Harold dominated the conversation, talking about his expansive lake house and the European vacation he planned to take Mom on for their honeymoon. When dessert arrived, he turned his attention to me. "Anderson, your mother tells me you are some type of engineer. My nephew is thinking about going into construction management. Maybe you could give him some pointers about trade school." I explained that architectural engineering required a master's degree, not trade school, but Harold had already moved on to discussing wedding plans. The wedding itself was extravagant and hasty, taking place just 3 months later at an exclusive country club. Harold insisted on paying for everything, dismissing my offers to help. "We want something elegant," he explained, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "No expense spared for your mother." After returning from their 3-week European tour, Harold announced he and the twins would be moving into our family home. "It makes the most sense financially," he told Mom. "Why maintain 2 households?" When Harold first saw the house, he immediately started pointing out what needed to be fixed. "This place has good bones, but it is so outdated. We will need to renovate the kitchen first, then modernize these bathrooms." Actually, I interjected. My dad designed and built those cabinets himself. They are solid cherry. Harold ran his finger along the countertop. Yes, but granite is what buyers expect these days. And these appliances must be 20 years old. They work perfectly fine, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Mom squeezed my arm. Harold just wants to make things nice for all of us. I could tell from that moment things were going to change, and not for the better. Over the next year, my childhood home became increasingly unrecognizable. Each visit revealed new changes, from the pristine white furniture that replaced our comfortable worn leather couch to the modern art that now hung where family photos once stood. The first major conflict arose when I arrived for Sunday dinner to discover Zach had moved into my old bedroom. "We put your things in boxes in the garage," Mom explained apologetically. Zach needed the space since he has so many sports trophies and gaming equipment. I found my childhood treasures haphazardly packed in damp cardboard boxes. My high school football jersey had developed mildew, and several model airplanes Dad and I had built together were broken. "These were important to me," I told Mom, holding up the damaged models. "I am sorry, sweetheart." Zach's friends were helping him move, and they must have been careless. "But you are 28 now. Isn't it time to let go of these childish things anyway?" Ellie was equally dismissive of our home's history, constantly complaining about the ancient kitchen. "These counters are like totally ancient," she whined during dinner. "None of my friends want to come over because everything looks so old-fashioned." Harold nodded sympathetically. "Do not worry, Princess, we will renovate soon." "Anderson, as an architect, you must understand the importance of keeping up with modern trends." "It is architectural engineer," I corrected, "and there is a difference between trends and craftsmanship that lasts." These little digs became routine. Harold frequently made comments about my modest apartment and bachelor lifestyle, suggesting I would grow up eventually and find a nice girl to settle me down. My mother, who once defended me fiercely, now laughed along with Harold's jokes, and occasionally added her own comments about how I should put myself out there more, or dress more professionally like Harold. Christmas was particularly painful. For as long as I could remember, our family tradition included homemade eggnog from Dad's recipe and his famous slow-roasted turkey. I arrived with ingredients to find a catering company, setting up an elaborate spread. "We decided to try something different this year," Mom explained, avoiding my eyes. "Harold thinks it is important to create new traditions." Later, I overheard Zach complaining to Ellie in the hallway. "Why does Anderson always have to come over? It is so annoying having him check out everything like he still lives here." "Mom says we have to be nice," Ellie replied. "But seriously, he is such a loser, living in that tiny apartment, while pretending to care about this dump of a house." Their words stung, but not as much as realizing my mother had likely heard similar comments and never corrected them. The final straw came when I drove by the house on a Saturday and spotted unfamiliar activity in the driveway. Stopping to investigate, I discovered a yard sale in progress. Among the items being sold were my father's prized woodworking tools. "Mom, what is going on?" I asked, picking up Dad's hand-carved mallet. She looked flustered. "Oh, Anderson. Harold needed to clear space in the garage for his golf equipment. We discussed getting rid of these old tools months ago." "No, we did not. These were Dad's. He made some of these himself." Harold appeared, placing his hand on Mom's shoulder. "Your mother and I made the decision together. These tools were just collecting dust, and frankly, they are a safety hazard with the kids around. I purchased my own father's tools for $80 and loaded them silently into my car. After that incident, I suggested monthly dinners instead of weekly visits, trying to maintain some relationship while protecting myself from the constant dismissal of my family's history." Mom agreed, seemingly relieved. When I arrived for our next dinner, I was shocked to find contractors tearing down the wall between the kitchen and dining room. "What is happening?" I asked, watching as the hand-crafted archway my father had designed was being demolished. "Surprise," Harold announced proudly. "We are finally bringing this place into the 21st century. Open concept is what everyone wants these days." "Did you know they were doing this?" I asked Mom. "Harold thought it would be nice to surprise me," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It will let more light in." "This archway was one of Dad's favorite details in the house," I said quietly. He spent weeks getting the curve just right. "Anderson, you need to stop living in the past," Harold said firmly. "This is our home now, and we need to make it suitable for a modern family." I noticed he emphasized the word "our" while excluding me from the family unit. That night I overheard a conversation that confirmed my suspicions about Harold's true intentions. While retrieving my jacket from the office, I spotted legal documents on the desk. Harold was investigating property values in the neighborhood and had drafted a letter to a real estate agent expressing interest in selling within the year. When I asked Mom about it later, she became defensive. "Harold and I are just exploring options. Nothing is decided yet." "Does he know who actually owns this house?" I asked. Her expression told me everything. I never saw the need to bring that up. It would only complicate things. As the renovations progressed, I became increasingly uncomfortable with each visit. The house that had once held my father's spirit was disappearing room by room. Even worse was overhearing Zach and Ellie's snide remarks whenever I expressed concern about a particular change. "God, he is so pathetic," Zach muttered after I asked about preserving the original hardwood floors. "Acting like he has any say in what happens to this house. If only they knew." The breaking point came on a warm evening in June. I arrived for our scheduled family dinner to find unfamiliar luxury cars parked in the driveway. As I approached the front door, I could hear Harold's booming voice guiding people through the living room. The current layout is dated, of course, but you can see the potential. We plan to take out this wall entirely to create a great room concept. I entered to discover Harold leading a couple in expensive clothing through my childhood home. The woman was pointing at various features, making notes on a tablet. "And the backyard has southern exposure," she asked. "Absolutely perfect for the pool you mentioned," wanting Harold assured her. My mother stood uncomfortably in the kitchen arranging appetizers on a tray. When she spotted me, her expression shifted from forced cheerfulness to guilt. "Anderson, you are early," she said. "What is going on here?" I asked quietly. "Harold is just showing some associates our renovation plans," she whispered. The prospective buyers left 30 minutes later with Harold promising to be in touch about next steps. He was beaming as he joined us at the dinner table where Zach and Ellie were already texting furiously on their phones. "Great news, everyone," Harold announced, pouring himself a generous glass of wine. "The Petersons loved the house and neighborhood. Once we finish the kitchen upgrades, I think we will be in excellent shape to list by September." I set down my fork. "List the house. You are selling." Harold nodded enthusiastically. "I have been looking at properties in Lakeside Estates. There is a spectacular 5-bedroom with a pool and home theater that would be perfect for us. Dad, will I get that basement gaming room you promised?" Zach asked suddenly, interested in the conversation. "Absolutely, son." "And Ellie, there is a perfect space for your photography studio." "What about Mom?" I asked. "Has anyone asked what she wants?" Harold waved dismissively. "Your mother and I have discussed this extensively. She agrees it is time to move to a home that better reflects our family status." I looked at my mother, who was staring down at her plate. "Mom, the new house is beautiful, Anderson," she said softly. "You would have your own guest suite when you visit." "Have you discussed this with the owner?" I asked calmly. Harold frowned. "What do you mean, the owner of this house? Have they agreed to sell?" Harold laughed, patronizingly. "Anderson, your mother and I make these decisions together. All the details will be handled by our real estate agent." I took a deep breath. "I think there has been a misunderstanding. This house is not yours to sell." "Excuse me," Harold's voice sharpened. "When my father died, he left this house to me, not to Mom. I am the legal owner." The silence that followed was deafening. Harold's face flushed dark red, while the twins stared open-mouthed between us. My mother closed her eyes briefly before speaking. "Anderson, please. Harold and I were planning to split the proceeds with you." Harold slammed his hand on the table. "Is this true? You do not own this house." Mom nodded slowly. "I never thought it was important to mention. Anderson has always let me live here. Let you, Harold sputtered. "So we have been living in his house this entire time, making improvements to his property. Improvements I could not help but laugh. You have been systematically destroying everything my father built, tearing out craftsmanship that cannot be replaced, and calling it improvement." Harold turned to my mother, his voice dangerously quiet. You deceived me. I did not think it mattered, she pleaded. Anderson would never force me to leave. Well, it matters now, Harold said. He turned to me with narrowed eyes. What is your game here? Planning to cash in on our renovations? There is no game. This is my father's house built with his hands. I promised him I would take care of it, and Mom. I have kept that promise by allowing all of you to live here rent-free, while you dismantled his legacy piece by piece. Harold stood abruptly. We have two options here. Either you sign over the house so we can sell it, or you are no longer welcome in our lives. My heart felt like it was being crushed. Are those really the only options, Harold, please? Mom began, but he cut her off. No. It is time your son grew up and stopped living in the past. Choose Lisa, your son or your family. I looked at my mother, silently pleading with her to stand up to this man who had systematically replaced our family history with his vision of luxury. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Anderson, please do not make this difficult. Harold has provided so much for me, for us. So you want me to just give away Dad's house, the house he built for us? It is just a house, she said, though we both knew that was a lie. Family is more important. I am your family, I replied. I have been your family for 28 years. Harold's voice cut through the tension. If you will not sign over the house, I think it is best you leave. The twins are uncomfortable with all this conflict. Zach and Ellie smirked behind their father, clearly enjoying my humiliation. In that moment, I realized how much I had lost already. Not just my father and his house, but the mother I had known all my life. She had been replaced by someone who valued status and comfort over family history and integrity. Fine, I said, standing slowly. I will go. But remember, this is still legally my house. Mom followed me to the door, tears streaming down her face. Please understand, Anderson. I need this marriage to work. I could not bring myself to answer as I walked to my car. That night I received a text message from my mother. Harold says, "This is for the best. Please do not contact us for a while. I love you." I spent a sleepless night researching property laws and left a message for my family attorney first thing in the morning. The meeting with my lawyer the next day confirmed what I already knew. As the legal owner, I had every right to decide who lived in the house and under what conditions. I had been extraordinarily generous, allowing Harold and his children to live there rent-free while they systematically erased my father's handiwork. You have several options, my attorney explained. You could evict them immediately, give them notice to vacate, or establish a formal rental agreement. I took a few days to consider my approach. Despite everything, I still loved my mother and wanted to give her a chance to make things right. But I also needed to honor my promise to my father and protect what remained of his legacy. After careful consideration, I drafted a formal letter with my lawyer and had it delivered by certified mail. The letter outlined 3 options. First, Harold and the twins could vacate the property within 60 days, and my mother could remain rent-free as originally intended. Second, they could all stay but would need to sign a formal lease agreement and pay market-rate rent with strict limitations on further renovations. Third, they could purchase the house from me at current market value, minus the cost of restoring the original features they had destroyed. The response was swift and explosive. Harold called me within an hour of receiving the letter, shouting threats about lawsuits and family obligations. "You, ungrateful little parasite," he snarled. "After everything your mother and I have done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Harold?" I asked calmly. "Besides, try to erase every trace of my father from his own house. We improved that outdated dump, added value to your precious inheritance. That outdated dump was built by my father for our family. Every corner had meaning and memory that you bulldozed without a second thought." He hung up after threatening to contest the will, though my lawyer assured me such attempts would be futile given the clear documentation. 2 days later, my mother appeared at my apartment door. Her eyes were red from crying, and she seemed smaller, somehow diminished. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I invited her in, noting that she glanced around my modest apartment with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time that I lived simply by choice, not necessity. "Harold is furious," she began. I gathered that from his phone call. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. He says we will contest the will that I had a right to the house as your father's wife. You know that will not work. Dad was explicit about his wishes, and you agreed to them at the time. She nodded slowly. I never thought it would come to this. When I met Harold, he seemed so strong, so capable. After losing your father, I felt adrift. Harold made decisions and took care of everything. Including deciding to erase Dad from our lives, I could not keep the bitterness from my voice. Tears filled her eyes. I did not see it that way at first. Each change seemed small, reasonable. Modernize this, update that. By the time I realized how much had changed, it felt too late to object. We talked for hours that evening. For the first time since Harold entered our lives, my mother truly listened. I showed her photographs of the original house, features the craftsmanship that had been discarded, and the plans my father had drawn for the home he built with love. I had no idea Harold was planning to sell, she confessed eventually. He mentioned looking at other properties, but I thought it was just curiosity. Then suddenly, there were real estate agents walking through, and he announced it as if it were already decided. Why did not you stand up to him? She looked down. His business is not doing as well as he pretends. The twins' private school tuition, our vacations, his country club membership. I think he needs the money from selling the house. This revelation did not surprise me. Harold's flashy lifestyle had always seemed somewhat performative. As our conversation wound down, I offered a compromise. Mom, you can stay in the house if you want. That was always the plan. But I cannot allow Harold to continue destroying Dad's legacy. She nodded slowly. I understand. I need some time to think. The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Ellie, Harold's daughter, contacted me through social media asking to meet for coffee. Curious, I agreed. I wanted to apologize, she said, stirring her latte nervously. The things Zach and I said about you about the house. We were just mimicking our dad. She explained that after receiving my letter, Harold's carefully constructed facade had cracked. He had ranted about financial pressures and made comments that revealed his true intentions. He never cared about the house, just what he could get for it, Ellie admitted. And the way he spoke to your mom when they thought they were alone. It was scary. This information strengthened my resolve. A week later, my mother called to tell me she was moving out temporarily to gain perspective. She had taken a small apartment near her school and was re-evaluating her relationship with Harold. 3 months after sending the letter, Harold and the twins moved out completely. My mother filed for separation, having discovered Harold had been hiding financial problems and had remortgaged his lake house to maintain appearances. When I finally returned to my childhood home, the damage was heartbreaking but not irreparable. I spent weekends carefully restoring what could be saved and respectfully updating what could not. Through the process, I rediscovered my connection to my father and his craftsmanship. 6 months later, my mother asked if she could help with the restoration. Working side by side, we began to rebuild not just the house, but our relationship. One evening, she brought out a box from her car. I saved these, she said, opening it to reveal my father's original house plans and several small mementos I thought had been discarded. I could not bear to let them go, even when Harold insisted. That box represented the first step in her reclaiming her own strength and values. Today, the house stands as a thoughtful blend of my father's original vision and carefully considered modern elements. I established a small foundation that helps single parents with housing needs named in my father's memory. My mother lives in a guest cottage we built in the backyard, giving us both independence while keeping family close. She has rediscovered her passion for teaching and volunteering. As for Harold, I hear he downsized significantly after the divorce. Ellie occasionally visits, having developed a genuine appreciation for the history and craftsmanship of the home her former stepfather had dismissed. The most important lesson I learned through this painful experience was that standing up for yourself does not mean closing the door on reconciliation. By refusing to let others take what was rightfully mine, I actually created space for authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than convenience or control. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about honoring family legacy while setting healthy boundaries. Do not forget to share with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most healing outcomes.